saying that statehood is not just a political idea. It's not just a policy idea. Statehood, self-determination, sovereignty, and true democracy in the land, in the stolen land. This is a fundamental idea of humanity, of culture, of justice. And so when we lift up the story of Jo, and her not as someone who's in the past, and someone who's very much in our lives today, and will be in our lives going forward, we're really lifting up that core idea. And so it's just such an honor in her place, in this library, will be a bit of the library of her thoughts and her life as an untiring activist to have all of you gathered here today, especially as a family. And so with that, I'd like to introduce someone who knew Jo, and knows Jo, and deeply worked with her in a wide range of ways, and has connected with a number of folks in the family through the years. And this is all, we're in a circle because, you know, life is a circle, the world is a circle, and there's room and invitation for her. Welcome, Professor Maurice Jackson.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with Jo's family. Some I talked to on the phone, on the email, but I've been overseas a lot lately. But let me start off by saying that I will donate many books to the library. I just have, so sorry. You know, I can really remember when I first met Jo. She was living at 1720 New Hampshire, first place I know. And I was living in the Granite State. I was a student at Antioch, and she lived there. This is before she moved to Swan Street, living in the house of Beulah Valley. And so when I remember when I met Jo actually was working for the DC London Association. She had become an organizer there. You all know the history well letter. She had come to Washington. Her husband was a hard carrier. She got very involved in the union. And that's just one aspect. So now I remember many aspects of Jo. The first, of course, was a labor organizer. Well, when my wife was writing her master's thesis, I had the interview. I had to share. She interviewed Jo, especially around Jo's work as an organizer and as a member of the OPLU, the Office of Professional Workers Union. And then, of course, Jo became very active with me around the Anti-Slavery Defense Committee. She was very active in that. And that out of the Anti-Slavery Defense Committee, we became chair of the Defense Committee and the Wilmington 10 Committee. So very active in all those things. And this predated, I don't know if you all knew the case of Terrence Johnson and out in Prince George's County. So she became very active with that. So early on, I invited her. Then Jo, of course, helped start the Reread Community Center. And of course, there was no school. The school for blacks was run down. And the schools were segregated, as you all may know. You had Adams, and then you had Morgan. One was black, one was white. So they were separated, and one was just dilapidated. And so what she did was, along with Hilda Mason, helped start this Reread Community Center, which is 18th in California. The time I was living at 18th in Wyoming. And then Jo was also active in the struggle for peace. And you all, I was just telling Tim with the name, she worked very active with a man named George Murphy. And the importance of this was because he was part of something called the World Peace Council, and they were active. And this society in Washington called the Paul Robeson Friendship Society. And so she was very active with the world movements. And George Murphy was a bit different. George Murphy was from the Murphy family who owned the Washington African American, both African American. So by black people standards, a quite rich family. But George was the black sheep because he was the rebel. He worked with Scottsburg boys. He worked with all those things. And it would have been wonderful if you could have just seen George and Murphy, George and Jo together. They were at meetings, especially. George liked what they call elk milk. You know what elk milk is? But that's Scotch milk. And Jo would like a little Scottish guy. And they would have there, they would get and stuff, and they'd just be wonderful watching them. And in that, they became very active in everything. But most notable, I remember, was the struggle for Grenada, because Jo had vacation for over the years going to Grenada. Long before we knew, and a man named Maurice Bishop came and led the country. in the first weeks he came to Washington, he stayed with me, and Joe and everybody else met with me, had an open hand. Tragically, when U.S. invaded Grenada, he had been killed. This was about 1979, 1980. And so Joe was dragging that, the World Peace Movement. And at that time, there weren't a lot of blacks active in things like this. And a lot of whites didn't want you active because it was, the Vietnam War, especially in Washington, D.C. There were all these struggles, and the whites would always come, bring everybody to demonstrations, but not more black participation in organizing demonstrations. So Joe very, very became active in that. And lastly, Joe became active, as you all know, but in the question of statehood. She was the first elected woman within the statehood party. She been very active. Julius Hobson, Lou Aronco was a gardener, Joe. And Joe was very different. Most of the statehood party people, they won't say it, but they were upper echelon, so to speak. They were well off. Hillary Mason was quite well off. Charlie Cassell, family of architects. Lou Aronco, the white guy, actually, he was a gardener, so he was most of the white Stan Smith. You see the name, was a multi-millionaire, and lived on Newark Street there. But Joe was the working class element in that. And so she is the one, and if you know Joe, you would see her, and she's the first one. I mean, she would be covered from buttons, head to toe, buttons. I don't know who has a button for that. And you would see Joe coming. Lastly, Joe, when my wife and I got married in 1983, Joe was there, and George Murphy were both there when I was a kid. She was one of the first to see our kids. And when Joe got sick, I remember very well, my wife would, every week would make her, Joe loved soup. When you were sick, you'd have to have soup, and Joe would, and Laura would bring her soup. I see you pictures there, and I thought that's some duplicate pictures, so I found them and I'll donate them to you. Is that the family archive? And I'll donate to the family archive. So it's agreed to meet the family members, and I'll participate again.
So many of us feel like we're the family of Joe Butler, but the actual family being here is a whole other thing. I wonder if Cara, you might like to share a few words about what she meant to you as your aunt and to your family today.
Well, thank you so much. She's just a tremendous inspiration. Giving us a sense of ownership when it comes to activism and wanting to serve. That's an inspiration for us, and I think it's just so, I don't want to say ironic, but Jillian has many children of her own, and so all are her nieces and nephews, and I believe that was God's intent for her to birth so many other things. A lot of people attribute motherhood and birthing things to having physical children. I believe that she birthed so much more than kids, and gave so much more to us. And so, that's how she's inspired me as a person.
What do you think is the thing that might be most surprising to learn about her for the general public? The thing that kind of most little known and maybe should be better known about her? Yeah, pick one thing.
I think she had a really good sense of humor.
Can you just take her, is it okay to take your mask off?
I think she had, and this is kind of with all of her siblings, she had a really good sense of humor. And she was able to see the humor in things that other people couldn't see the humor in. Because my grandmother, her sister, also had like a really good sense of humor. So I think she was like, from what I remember of her, she was really funny, and she was like always like telling a joke. And of course, for me, the thing I remember the most is her ubiquitous vest of buttons. And so I would kind of, every time I saw her, kind of look and see, oh, is there a new button? And so if there was, she would like sit there and give me the whole spiel. This is how I got the button, and this is the I know I got all of that. Sorry. But I remember her for that, and just like Kara said, she really did believe in being of service to others, and I think I kind of got that from her too. Just I want to be of service to other people.
Nate, do you want to share something about Joe that you think is important for people to hear?
I just remember when, as a child, she would come down in the country to visit her mother from the trip from Grenada and the World Council Peace, and she would just share about, what she was doing and the trips and how it was going and how, like third world countries compared to what was going on in America. And
What did that mean to you when you were young and she was sharing that with you?
I think I was just too young to, grasp what she was really telling me. Yeah.
But it's funny, like.
And can you say your name as you're speaking to everybody?
Well, I'm Greg Dr. I'm one of her, I guess, older nephews. But I remember that she was totally in love with politics. And my grandfather was too. And them two used to get together and talk about it all the time. But we were so young, we didn't know what politics was all about. But we know that she had this yearning to do this. And whenever she came down, she had these stories that she would tell us about different places that she'd been and how education was free all around the world. And she would tell us all of these great things. But being so young, we really didn't get it until now. We realized just how big an impact that she had in Washington, D.C. and the things that she's done. I think that for me, I'm just beginning to realize just how much she was involved in doing stuff for the city. And so, I think it's wonderful. I remember her coming and telling the stories, but I was too young like Nathan to really get the real feel of what she was doing. But right now, it's a great thing to know that she was a great person. So I'm really getting the joy out of knowing everything she's done, so far. I didn't know she was into the unions and everything, but she was doing everything.
And to put it, what a couple of you guys are saying together, on the one hand, she almost had a childlike sense of humor, to use the point you were making, but she could carry that at the same time as she had this immense stubborn passion for seeing the world as it needed to be.
Yeah.
I found that an amazing combination. She could laugh at herself, which is pretty rare among activists. I remember one time when she was trying to catch the bus on 16th Street, and she had to laughingly tell me that she didn't know what bus it was because she couldn't see. She'd had cataracts. And so she's making fun of how blind she is as she's laughing about the situation of being at the bus stop and not knowing what bus it is that's right in front of her. And yet, when you look at that photo that's in our lobby, that is the center of the spirit of her center here, that was taken by the Washington Post after the U.S. Senate soundingly defeated voting rights for the people of the District of Columbia. And I believe the Washington Post wanted to get an image of poor old Joe Butler giving up on her cause. And we asked people to tell us what part of that stubbornly joyful smile says give up in it. What part of that soul and spirit ever had give up in it? And so I just find that an amazing topic. The other people from the family want to say anything about that? How did you see that? Yeah.
I'm Jim. I'm one of the nephews. It's been 25 years. I'm still in shock as to who my mom was, what she did. At her funeral, I kept thinking, this is the mom we're talking about? She's been around the world. She met dignitaries. She shook hands with special people. It's amazing to know that somebody in your family, and she kept a low profile. She told her brother, she never come to brag and say, hey, I went to so such. Right. You would never know it. Tell somebody else story. Because she was a beautiful person.
Yes, she was.
And I'm still in shock. Her funeral was 25 years ago, and I'm still in shock.
And I think to piggyback off of what Jim just said. Like being like I said, I'm probably one of the younger ones. But
Can you introduce yourself to her?
Oh, and I met you. I'm Takima. I'm Takima Taylor. I am her great niece. That like so just like what my cousin said about we didn't know how great she was because it wasn't like we knew she did things, but not on that great of a scale then. And now when I look back on it, I said I would go to school and then go to the 6th floor of Howard Hospital like it was nothing to go see her in Hilda Mason. But when she was in the hospital, Hilda Mason was always by her side. Like that's the best thing everybody needs. But like this was normal to me, but not normal to everybody else. But I didn't know that that wasn't normal. And so we still got to keep grounded. But then as we got older, it's like, okay, she was such a great person. And then that's why I said, like, we have to consider us.
I was gonna say to your question, what would surprise me or things that I think would be surprising to people, and I was stuck because I'm not surprised. A lot of things, you know, when I hear more of the causes that she was involved in and what of the things that she does or had done, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm more in awe of her, but it's not surprising because I knew that she did so many things that we didn't really know about. But I remember as a kid growing up during the Cold War, and I think the conversations have come up again, war in Ukraine and nuclear war and everything, when we used to have these, the bomb drills and stuff like that. And my mom telling me, yeah, Angel's going to Russia. And I'm like, I was like, I'm going to go to Russia. That's my thought. And then she brought back this beautiful fur coat that I think several family members, I think I was like the third one to get. And then I passed it on to somebody else, but that was the story. And I remember going to first grade wearing this beautiful fur coat. I was pressed to wear this coat. My mom buttoned it for me to get on the school bus. All the kids were rubbing on the dirt. And I was in the coat forever trying to take it off. I had to wear that, like I couldn't wait for it to get home. I wanted to be able to tell people that my aunt brought this back from Russia and you know, you had to have a little fight. But the other thing is that I remember my grandmother talking about taking Aunt Jo to the airport to, you know, go on one of her trips. And our family always shopped at the thrift store, so that's not a big deal. But Aunt Jo didn't have luggage. She would like take a trash bag with her stuff. And my grandmother would be like, oh my God, I gotta get Jo some luggage because she's going overseas, you know, to deal with all these dignitaries and, you know, they're going out the great offer. Yeah, she can help you know, like she was not fazed by, you know, material trappings and things like that. She was focused on traveling, doing, you know, her work. It was not a big deal for her to, she was like, what's the deal? You know, but that was how she was, very humble. And so I think that's one of the reasons why as a family, a lot of the things that she did was so under the radar because she didn't talk about, like she talked about what she was passionate about at that time, but she wasn't gonna roll off her resume to you unless you specifically asked. Like I did a report on her, so she gave me her resume because I needed to include it, but if you didn't ask her, she wasn't gonna roll out the resume unless she was specifically talking about those causes. So, you know, that was one of the reasons why there was a lot of stuff we just didn't know about. And honestly, she probably, I won't say forgot, but like, to sit there and remember all the stuff you're doing when you're just that busy and that involved, to share with people your accomplishments, and that wasn't even her way to dote on herself. I'm doing the work, And I think that's another great thing is that that's why her legacy is so long, because the work is going to keep coming back up. It's going to keep reuniting. It's going to continue to hear about and see and experience the things that she did, because it was, her work was so deep and touched in so many ways.
I'm just amazed at how much she had, working in the work, how much she gotten done. And from my knowledge, she never had a car. I mean, we'd always pick her up at a Greyhound bus station somewhere, to bring her down to do all what she did, and never really had her own transportation.
And taking the time using the bus to go down to MLK, fill up that satchel of books every other week, and then take up to her mom. And so she could read to her mom, and mom could read. And the way they would pick out a topic each week, what that book they were going to be reading.
Yeah.
And I remember when she decided to pick James Buchanan. So the picture of a daughter and a granddaughter of enslaved people reading about the last president to preside over slavery, because they felt that, Joe felt at least, that it was too easy to pigeonhole him through the 2020 hindsight of history, and she was interested in looking at his decisions as lessons for leadership today. How do we make those choices when he was trying to avoid bloodshed but also end slavery? And what can we learn from that without just being him and labeling him? I found that amazing. Well, you talk about legacy. So thinking about today, thinking about Joe, I was at an event last year dedicating the new mural to George Floyd and Joe Butler down the shop. And everybody at the event was saying how sorry they were that Joe is no longer with us. And I spoke up at the end and I said, I'm sorry, I just need to tell you, you're all wrong. Because she is here, she did everything. I can tell you that every fear sounds in my body. So what is her legacy today? What is it about her voice and her life that is alive in your hearts and in our world right now? At a time when I believe we need her voice more than ever.
More for the people.
Say more about that.
So, how do I say this? I'll say the administration in DC right now is not for the people. And there are a lot of people suffering, and that really because they're looking at like building new buildings, businesses and stuff, but not looking at the costs that the citizens are taking that live in the city, especially the ones that can't afford to, live there. And it's just like nothing. Well, I guess we had COVID too, but it's nothing that makes you feel like, oh my gosh, it's a great day to live in DC right now. Like it was when Lord on Joe don't kill me. When on Joe and Marion buried me. But like, it's like just to get that back where it's like, it's for the people, like where the people enjoy being in the city. And like I said, great city, but there needs to be more programs and things dedicated to the people.
Right, so at this time when the whole identity of the chocolate city is on the line, when we're right at this point of losing the majority of people of color, how do we lift that up in a way that it doesn't have white hegemony, just displace and forget about all of that?
And just to bring it back to the people. Like it's to start programs and actually finding different, how do I talk about this first? Just finding different things to get people more involved and things that they want to. It's like a hard thing because we're coming out of COVID too, but it's just having programs, having like the festivals, like they did have a street festival, just things to let the people know, look, we haven't forgotten about you.
Right.
And as far as about bringing people of color back, it has to be affordable for everybody.
And so right now, when we look at the issues before the city, people are talking about statehood. There are more young people, including young people of color, who are getting engaged for 51 for 51, DC Vote, all these different programs. But remember when Jesse Jackson invited us all to hold hands around the Capitol for statehood? And we couldn't get but 1/6 of the way around the Capitol because there's so many people who are so sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, they've had folks at the bottom of the barrel forever, and people are just thinking it's hopeless. Well, Jo used to carry around in her satchel something from the congressional record from 1802, quoting John Adams, saying, "There will come a time when we have sufficient wealth and population that DC shall have to have self-government," meaning statehood. And so here we have wealth pouring into the city, we have void displacement and gentrification, and it seems like we're closer to statehood, but there are people who are now questioning, well, is statehood really going to be what we wanted it to be? So it's interesting when you're at that point of possibly winning that, there's also a sense of possibly losing. Professor Jackson, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. But just one thing about Jo, the other thing is that, you know, I remember coming here in, I guess, mid-70s, and I was from Newport News, Virginia, so I was from the projects. And just working guys, spent time working in the shipyard as a kid. So when I came to DC, it was the first time I had ever been around, really, black folks with money. And I must say, they were the strangest lot out there. And so the city was very, of course it's very divided now by race, but it was back, so you had blacks in the upper coast, and the blacks, we had a little something, I mean, they just were very standoffish. As you remember when Murray won the first election, he did not get the working class vote. What he got was the liberal white votes and others. And Washington got the working class, mainly because he controlled the budget. And Sterling Tucker got the upper elite vote. But anyway, I say this because this is during a time when Jo took these issues, they weren't always popular with black people. Statehood, you know, he said Fontrail was not for statehood, Northern was not for statehood, none of them were for statehood at the time. They were for something called voting rights. And Fontrail was for voting rights. So when Jo took that position, it sort of put her on the outside. When she goes to the Soviet Union and other places like that, I have been, it's a long time, but I have been many times, I was all over the world. And, you know, when you go, you follow everywhere. I can't tell you the stories about the Secret Service and other people like that just following you. You have to go to embassies and this thing, they would call you jobs all the time. I remember when Maurice Bishop, they called my job. And the thing about when the FBI comes, if you don't say anything to them, you don't have to say anything. But if you ask the first question, then you're obliged to answer others, so you just don't answer. Most people don't. Most people, they're scared. And I was young and a bit naive, so I brother fearless, and Jo was fearless because every time she went to Soviet Union, they would come, they would, and she knew she did not have to. Some people try to outsmart them, but you can't outsmart, so you have that. And they call you job, and then, but that's where the humor comes in, because she could use the humor to give, because there were just many examples. Then another thing about Jo is, and this is important, is that when the Washington Post had a strike of printers in 1975, I believe it is, and the Washington Post was scandalous in the way it dealt with black people. It's awful. The white printers, they were working class, get Joes from Southern Maryland, places like that. When they were in New York, they were working class, but they were bigoted, and they had all the good jobs as printers, as press. The only thing the blacks could do was the jobs where you rolled the ink. But Jo was such a working class that she took it upon herself to go out and organize black workers in support of these white bigoted workers because they were workers too. And she knew if she did that, they would have to integrate the pressmen's union, which they did. So she organized that. But a lot of other people did not see the importance of it. And there was one man. His name was Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson was from Maryland. He very bad in Native America. And he was persecuted so much because he stood up. They wanted him to sign an anti-Lloyd law. And he was an anti-communist of Lloyd law. You had to sign an oath if you were in the party. Or if you were a fellow traveler, you knew anyone. you had to sign up, and Joe, and he refused to sign, they fired him. And when Joe was coming up, they wanted her to sign it for the government, and she wouldn't. And so this old man, they destroyed him. And Joe and George Murphy and another Hungarian man named Frank something took him out and nursed him. His sad last years about that. You know, this whole thing about statehood, something in another conference, you know, and I was saying, you remember what Ted Kennedy said that Washington is four tools: black, too urban, too liberal, and too poor. Therefore, they would never be voting right representation. And part of it is very true. And now, if you look at the city, it becomes whiter, becomes richer. I just did a study for the city. They may ask me to do economics study. And some of the results they didn't take a light. But what we find is that the population, the black population, is so hurt. It makes about $40,000 per family, average, median, to about 150 whites. And it just pushed out at every step. City leaders knew this was going to happen. At one time, we had the majority of the city council, but we did nothing because they didn't listen to people like Joe. Now, you're right. They do it. I think it's not going to be as easy as people think just because white people move here. But the assumption is going to be that most whites are dirty. Not to most whites are dirty. You know how I know? It's because when my kids were growing up, they wanted blacks to go to school in Wilson. They wanted you to cross the track, but school was so segregated. Now they don't want you there. Because white men, they can't pay for the private schools they want to do. And the schools now, schools now almost segregated. You watch, and then they were in 1949. 90% of blacks never go to school with white kids. 90% of whites, the only place they go to school together is Wilson High School over here. Back to High School over there, school with other walls over there. So the city is becoming so segregated. So statehood may or may not, you know, I don't know. But it's coming to a much different population. They should have been about very wrong, turned out. One thing about communities and people, once people leave the city, they never come back. They just never come back. Once you leave the projects, because the housing is just going to be so expensive. And they think about lower moderate income. When they talk about lower moderate income, still $50,000 a family. And with 2 or 3 kids going to school, you just can't make it. And that's why voices are needed. I'm afraid not, though. I was in this a long time, and we struggle. So I'm teaching now, I'm writing, but I'm not out the street every day like a lot of people are. We need more people who want to be like Joe, follow those. So the other thing about her sweater, actually, she had that, but what Tinker made with the head.
And we actually have the hat here, and I think you may remember at her memorial, it had gone on for a long time. It was so packed, the streets were shut down. I was supposed to speak loud, so that I didn't want to hold up the schools from getting out and all that. But I held up her hat. Nobody knew I had that, and I just invoked her name. And there was like a gasp that went across the floor. I mean, the whole congregation rose, and you could do former mayors, everybody all together in this one standing motion for this amazing woman whose memory is embedded in the past, present, and future of our city and all our lives. And you just felt her spirit rising, and I think it's been rising ever since. You spoke about the voices that are needed right now. I wonder if some of the younger family members of Joe want to share anything about what she means to you, what you think about when you think about Joe and your life and the world today. Does she mean anything to you guys today? Can you lower your mask again? And identify yourself.
My name is Justin. I'm there's a lot of pride, and I'm really proud to come from the lineage of Joe, just because of all the things that she has done. I first found out about her when I had this history report on a historical figure. It didn't matter who, just a historical figure. This was back in the 3rd grade. I was like, well, some people were doing Abraham Lincoln, some people were doing, one person did J-Lo. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And my mom too, like, you know what you should do the report on? You should do the report on your Aunt Joe. And from there, it was just like this big wormhole of information that was just like put in front of me. And now every time I pass by this area, it's not often that I'm able to pass this area. Whenever I do, I'm just like, yeah, that's Aunt Joe. That's what she stood for. A lot of times whenever I might come into conversations at school about statehood, or when we were saying with integration and gentrification, and just a lot of stuff like that, and how what she did to help, a lot of the things became getting students together. I see that a lot of students, I go to Dallas, it's a predominantly African American. It always has been. I see how the way PCBS has tried to contort school for something that it didn't, because in the zoning of schools and stuff like that, making it so that certain students aren't able to go to certain schools, and how a lot of people who go to come from east of the southeast, because we know that the only thing on that side, in the copy of blue, you know that a lot of the opportunities that we get on this side of town is a lot more than what students on the other side of the DC are able to get, with that might not be able to get. It's a really big issue when you said there are more segregated now than they were then. I can see that now. I can see there's already, I lived there, it was a really diverse school. And now it's 3 years ago. Now it changed. I walked past school and there was only 3 black students, and then the rest of them just completely Caucasian. And when it comes to schools like Wilson, because it's a feeder school, so many students. There's only so many high schools in DC to begin with, let alone high schools that have different opportunity for students. I don't know if they have JROTC, just with the military, and different opportunities and stuff like that. But yeah, if we can go to Balloon and across Europe, it's everyone that I know, whether it be my classes or my friends, we know Balloon and Anacostia as the schools that are the last resort. And the whole reason why we wanted to come to schools on this side of town is because when it comes to education, over here have it better. So that's what I have to say.
Anyone else want to share from the younger end of Joe's brother?
I will. So I'm Marvin, and I have heard a great nephew on the side. I've been going to Malcolm Park for a while, for a long time. And before I even knew her name, I never knew who she was. So I saw her name in an article about Malcolm X Park, and then I saw her name in an article at Family Reunion or something. So I was putting 2 and 2 together, and I'm like, hold up, okay. Also, I protest a lot in the streets, I'm a bike rider, so I'm always in the city doing a lot of things. So once I found out who she was, I did a lot of research, got in touch with family members, reading different articles, and it really inspired me to learn more about her. And even though the building was here for that long of a time, I feel involved. So the connection was already planted. The leaves are starting to grow now. So I feel it just a lot of love. So,
When you think about that mural that opened last year of her and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, why do you think they chose Joe to go with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter? All the people that they might have put up on that mural.
There's two people that change the world.
Yeah.
That change the how we could see that. Because Joe always thought that you could be better. And to be Black Lives Matter is saying that we are better. We do that. Joe was always for that day. I will think she saw a difference. She looked at everybody. So what I would like to find out, do she have a button or no picture on? She does, because I don't know how I got into it, but I collect buttons too. Now I know I got giant button more than my face with buttons from everywhere. With Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, and I'm trying to figure out I can just feel the button from her, but I can find the button that Joe.
We were talking, Professor Jackson and I were talking about what a horrible candidate she was. In part because she wasn't somebody who was ever going to promote herself. It was the last thing she'd ever do. She wasn't like a politician.
I'm sorry, I just thought about something too. The similarity between Joe and George Floyd was that they could stand for things while they were living, but not until their death is what they stand for, just propel forward. Because DC wasn't filled with all of these, where you can go and see a flag with 51 stars, or you'll see statehood everywhere. This was not like this anytime, while she was living, the first 10 years, but now every time you go around, you see it. And the only thing I always say, you can't say statehood without saying Joe Butler. That's the whole thing by putting her name back in everything. But yeah, through their death, what they represented just sprung forward. Black Lives Matter meant something, but for people to see this man hold his knee on that man's neck all this time, and then it was that was finally something where they couldn't say, oh, it's an accident or nothing. You did that on purpose. And so that just propelled that forward. And her death, even she said she knew what's going to happen, and it just propelled that forward.
And so she would say that to us, when that defeat happened in '93. The joy that's in that smile obviously didn't come from the defeat. It came from the wise understanding of the system that because the Senate had finally voted on it and were on record on it, eventually we were going to win. And she said it just wouldn't be in her lifetime. And so she would try to talk to me about revolutionary peace. And I still don't know that I have a clue what exactly that means. To not grow up black in America, to grow up black in America is challenged with just how patient you want to be every day. So how do you balance patience with revolution?
I think to the world, I think she thought as planting the seed. I'm sorry, I am Nick Jr., this is my dad. I think she saw it as planting a seed, and she knew that seed that she planted at that time, and that was maybe a small win, but it would, have a ripple effect. And so
she was kind of sure of that.
Yes.
She knew that seed, as sure as the things we were planning with the kids with the earthworm, she knew that seed was going to bear some really fruit.
And, I now myself the first time. His oldest daughter. And Joe is my dream on. I also think, too, that he knew that at a certain time, Black people are going to get to the point where we're tired, and we're now going to some revolutionary things. And so for her, it's, to think that, what my cousin said, planted your seeds, but all the time she's knowing in a later day, Black folks are going to get tired. And I think with the combination of George Floyd, we started getting tired. We are now seeing the younger generation of Black children, justice generation. Okay, we're done with this. You told us to protest a program. So our parents, our grandparents, marched into protest the program. Oh, you can do it like that. So now you're gonna have to do this. We have now done kind of everything with what society wanted us to do and how to protest. And you're still like, no, we're not gonna do it. You have now these young kids who are like, F that, we're going to just, do it anyway. And that was what she planted. Her protest and her working may not have been in the same way that the revolution, the protest is working now, but they're intertwined and they're connected. And she started what's about to happen now and what will happen in the future.
I'm thinking of another connection to Black Lives Matter, which is one of the most, for me, surprising things that I thought in the marches down 15th Street, in the rallies and protests around the country, was that with the anger, with the outrage, I saw an enormous outpouring of love. And that really threw me. I didn't expect to see that. I couldn't really quite fathom that. Trying to see how if I were Black, I couldn't imagine how I could find love amid the outrage. And that, to me, is the transcendent part of what she brought, what she tried to bring. That there was a sort of a revolutionary level of love. It wasn't about looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, seeing that we're not going to get anywhere unless we all come together.
Well, if you think about it, love is a part of revolution. Because wanting better for yourself and for your people starts with love. I love myself enough that I deserve not just equality, but equity. And that starts from, I love myself and I love I call Black people my tribal people. I love myself and my tribal people enough to know that we deserve better than what we've been handed. So yes, revolution may have anger associated with it, but revolution and protest starts with love, because if you don't love yourself and love your brother enough to know that we deserve better, it's not going to work.
That love that you're thinking of, that's inherent for our people.
Yeah.
That's not something, it's not, something that's contrived. Yeah, we fight because we have to fight, but we are genuinely loving and forgiving people. That's why Marion Barry is Mayor for life, because no matter what he did, at the end of the day, he finds ways to forgive and move past it. In terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd's death brought into the forefront all the things that we've been saying, and that Aunt Joe's generation was saying, that they've been saying all along, that people try to act like wasn't happening and shove under the rug. And now we had eyewitness accounts, people videoing it, people standing there watching it, people saying I had coworkers before racism had ended. And when they saw this, they're like, oh wow. This is what you all were talking about all along. They're like, hello, light bulb on. So finally, you're seeing what we've been saying all along. When NWA was, saying, I believe this is what's going on, everybody's like, why are you saying that? Because this is what we experience. And so, I think, that is why his faith was there. But, these are two different people. Aunt Joe's activism and bringing forth the importance of Black lives. You have a Black female who has really never gotten recognition for all that she did, especially because she was doing work at a time when Black women were not on the radar. Women, period, weren't on the radar. And so who else would be a great face for our lives mattering than a Black woman who did all of this stuff and went under the radar. My son goes to Stewart Hobson, middle school and see Julian Thomas every day going in the building, and I'm like, I want to see Josephine Butler school, where this woman who helped to integrate schools in this ward. You know, no takeaway from Stuart Orhausen, but Josephine Butler deserves school as well. To see that, you know, what you have one person whose death and circumstances to bring about finally recognizing what we've been saying all along, and then you have a woman who has fought for us to be recognized. Those are the two faces that we're seeing there. But when we talk about the seeds being planted by Josephine Butler, I think that it's symbolic of what we all need to understand, that we're not necessarily put here. We're all put here for a reason and for a season, and not necessarily to complete the work, but we all have our assignment. And I think Anjo understood that her assignment wasn't necessarily to complete the movement, but she did what she was supposed to do. And it's our turn to do our part, which is to pick up her legacy, pick up this torch, and continue her work. And you know, that's why it's so important to me that we as a family know and understand and recognize her work. She didn't have children, and my prayer that my children would have my legacy. That's why I emphasize all the time that she didn't have children. She had us. And so we have, and sometimes I feel guilty that, you know, I did not understand or why did I know. And now I recognize that I don't have to feel guilty because we know now, we recognize that now it's not. We didn't have to know before because it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time. Everything has aligned perfectly right now in this season for us to recognize her work, recognize her legacy, recognize, you know, we're at a pivotal point in DC history that we do need to bring her name and what she fought for back to the fight for DC statehood, because it has gotten away from the grassroots reason why she wanted statehood, and that was like her whole thought around everything that she was about, and about our rights, about the rights of people, and about people having the basic needs of life. And it's got to be so politicized. It's got to be something that people in Kansas are arguing about. They have no clue what, you know, everybody's from here. And so we bring back this woman who lived in this ward, like I said, didn't have a car. She was about her community. She was an A&P commissioner on the A&P in Ward 2. She was a councilwoman in this, you know, in this ward. Clearly her fight was for her community and her city. It wasn't about what anybody else had to say or, you know, anything like that. Recognize that this is a fight for the local community. It's not like nobody else can you can't contribute to the conversation if you're from Idaho. You can't contribute to this conversation if you're from one of these other places you don't live in. You should not be or having a say on how we spend our money, how we fund our food, how we pave our streets, how we protect our city, and whether or not the mayor calling the National Guard or the over the Capitol have that say and that power. And the last thing, the beautiful thing about Anjo is that, or one of the other beautiful things is that she did it her way. I think I can remember one of you all mentioned, like, Black people have had to conform to. Yeah. We've had to assimilate all this time, and she never did it. If you think about how she carried herself, how she did things, she never conformed. Yeah. She never assimilated. And she wore that proudly. And so here we are, full circle now, Black folks are starting to recognize, like, we tried, like you said, Kim, we tried to push our way. And we went to the office, we pulled our napkins back, and got wigs on, you know, we wore our suits, we spoke properly at work, but we, you know, spoke our language at home. We did all of that, and yet we're back where we started. All right, guess what? Now we're going to be, we are proud. We just have to be proud of who we are, and that's what we're all about. Exactly what she took her natural self, her sharecropping daughter self, to put the Soviet to Grenada. She put that everywhere, and she was loved and respected and admired for it. So that's something else that I'm finally coming into is, you know, not having to do what we did back in the day and assimilate, but now being proud of who I am and, you know, teaching my boys to be proud of who they are and carry that with them wherever they go and lead from that.
More so, like you said earlier, it's more so that in my generation, how it's affected older generations, how the lack of has affected also our generation. I was like, it's like, now, there's been almost like sitcoms of how kids in a lot of like that have that some of not I think it's more so like people, when you get like getting hired, you know, not only the way they have to just how that like older generations, it's never fair to give them, but people get tired of that. People are really listening. The sheer traumas or things that they deal with wouldn't like collaborate together. Like get to a better issue. What we've done before obviously hasn't worked. I think that the basis is why long-term report together when you don't move back at what you did and appreciate what you did and like that's where a lot of stuff that you're fighting against down to happen or no change to happen at all. So sitting her at the forefront of issues that are still going on today that happened when she was a child, still things are happening. We're still getting lynched. It might not be happening as often, but it's still happening. People do the same way. The KKK is still around. It might not be in as many numbers, but it's still an organization. So, yeah, not.
The people don't use the title until no more. Right. Running up in the Capitol.
Yeah, so I think it's more so about honoring the past, learning from the past, so that you don't repeat it, so that we can forward from that in a positive. You can always move forward, but not in the good direction. It's more about moving in a positive direction where it's not just applicable for one group of people, for that small group of that one people, but for everyone. And then not only making it so that it's at like where it's, how do I say it? It's that phrase like separate but equal was never the case. And for us to, like people of color in general, for us to get at that same playing field that white people have been at for this long time, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a collaborative issue. It's not about one being over one or more than the other. It's about being able to collaboratively work together, appreciate each other's differences, appreciate the things that make us different, because that's what makes us human together. You know, we like bash each other for our differences, and that's not what we want.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Marco Washington. I'm a sophomore political science major, transferring to be a marketing major from Harlem, New York. I've been out here in DC for the past decade. Started school back in 2012, Lofty Scholarship, stayed at the Covenant House, learned about food insecurity, learned about DC for real, and learned that how to move on. Being here now, because I've done, like my fellow brother over here, I've done the road testing and everything. It's really messed up that her name's not said. When it comes to statehood and 51 statehood, and it's really messed up how people are monetizing, capitalizing, and like are just murking up the whole entire what you truly want to do, help people. I guess I have a question. It is, how can one truly be unapologetically themselves and not just be a seed planter, but a harvester as well? Because one thing I noticed with the George Floyd incident, because I had two professors, they created a governmental lobbying class, because after the George, and they're both white and Caucasian, and after the George Floyd incident, they was like, we need to make a class for this, so that we can get more opportunities to the Black community and everything like that. But having protests, having seen this, that, and third, I'm just like, and even what you mentioned earlier with NWA and Rodney King, I believe the difference between that situation and this one is that it was more so a case of innocence. A case of you can't argue. But it's 2022 now, and people aren't protesting as much as they were before. I believe that people are marketing or, for lack of a better word, getting clout off of the suffering of others instead of really staying to the seed root plant. So how can somebody be unapologetically themselves to truly want to help people, not trying to benefit any other way, and actually see their plant grow and live the art? Because if not, we're going to just keep planting the seed and keep doing the same thing.
Mr. Jackson, you have a thought on that?
Many, but
We have to, I think, because you're saying it out of frustration a little bit, I believe. And
I'm saying that out of understanding and having actually been on the front lines. Because everybody talks about January 6th. Nobody talks about when the Proud Boys actually came on December 18th. I was there when they came on December 18th. And I was there on January 6th. So it's just like, it's not a point of frustration. It's a point of understanding. It's a point of having gone through UDC, understanding and appreciating my UDC, being a proud fiber, realizing that, okay, I need to get back into Howard, being the only person I know who has, I have a two-bedroom condo for myself, so it's not a place of frustration, it's a place of understanding that, once you, like you're saying, it's a collective consciousness. We're all waking up, we're all realizing something is wrong in the whole environment, but effective change, lasting change with these ideals hasn't really been effective, because there has been people who have talked about what we're talking about before, during the Civil Rights Movement, before the Civil Rights Movement, after the Civil Rights Movement, but it seems like things build up and then die out.
I think one of the things that we have to realize is that working for civil rights and working through it in a capitalistic structure is the problem. Because, like you said, you have people who are monetizing off of the suffering of others. That's kind of how capitalism is kind of made to work. You're going to have to dismantle two things at one time. Capitalism is going to be very hard to dismantle, because it is literally the foundation of how all of this works. And even though you have Black people, because we've all been told, right, the American dream, go out and get an education, and you'll get a job, and you'll get a house, you'll give this, that, and third. So you have a lot of people, maybe our parents' age, even my age, I'm a Gen Xer, who kind of bought into that. And we're like, oh, we can kind of fight for civil rights and fight for it in the legislative sense, like the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and all of those things, but we can still kind of work in the confines of capitalism. And then what happens is the millennials and the Gen Z go, capitalism isn't working for us either. Because now I went to college and I have $120,000 in student loans that I will never pay off in my lifetime. Never. I can't get a house because that house is $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. And no one's going to give me a $700,000 loan for that house if I have $120,000 in student loan debt. And then, on top of that, I get a job because someone wants me to have 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree, which might pay $35,000. You're going to have to example both the racism and capitalism in order for it to work. And dismantling, I hate to say it, dismantling capitalism is going to be a lot harder than dismantling racism. Because they're interconnected.
They're almost one and the same. They're one and the same. Capitalism is based off of an economic system that was based off of free labor. So of course you're going to have 100% profit if you don't have to pay anybody. And so we didn't have access to that system. So we're already, people of color are going to be behind the eight ball because we don't have, if I started this today, I can't have slaves work for me, but I have to pay the labor cost. So my overhead is already going to be up there. We will never ever have even playing field as far as that's concerned. And that generational wealth is passed on to folks that don't know us. But we don't have that, we will never have that equal playing field. And folks who have that are not going to give it up. They're going to give it to us. So, right. Like I said,
But then what's going on too is you have people that don't look like us and now get caught up in that same thing because the generational wealth gap has now widened. So now we have a certain segment of maybe the white population who's able to do that. And now you have this other certain segment of white population who historically votes against their best interest. We all know why. Who's now like, well, what do we do now?
they're mad, and that's why they ran up in the capital.
And they're mad, and that's why they run in the house.
So this is why you're exactly right.
You know, here's the thing. I had students come out all the time, and they give me their stories. And I say 3 things you can't do. You can't out poor it. You can't out black it. And I hope you're not thinking. But here's the thing now. If we mess around, we're going to express ourselves so bad and never do anything. Right. And I was really a joke. You actually think it's worse now than it was for Joe Summer? No, sir. Not a bit. But when I was done. No, sir. So you got to organize, you got to have faith. You got to get it together. Joe, she talked about the role of black women, and no one had harder than a black woman in Washington, D.C. She only fought against the racism in the state of Florida. And so, what did she do? She had to try to put it together, and as you said, she always had that young woman. Now, that means we have to organize. We can't talk, we have to eat. You know, we take the time, we have to start organizing people where we live in every organization possible. And there's so many organizations out here. You know, well, if you want the industry to go that way, if you want this one to go, that's the thing about Joe. She formed an organization, she worked with me. The other thing about Joe. And it was hard for me to figure out, still hard for me to figure out. You can't give up faith in white people. Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. All right.
Actually, no, I'm not putting up this.
Hold on a second. Because there's never been any movement in America that's won anything that didn't have white allies. You can't name one. You had to have James Brown or John Brown. So, and that was the thing about Joe. We have to figure out a way. So these white liberals and stuff, they're gonna have their money. They're not gonna get it. But we have to find ways to create, and there's so many organizing mechanisms that we can work through. The Black Lives Matter is one, but the problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, the problem was that they didn't think anybody knew anything anybody knew it, and they have to learn the lessons, and we have to learn, because it's faltering. And you have black people there running down. I read about they got $1 million cars because they went one, because they did what Du Bois did. Some blacks want the equal right to do wrong. So the white man did, I can do it. So we have to get rid of all of these attitudes, and we just have to figure out a way. And how do we do it? We got to work. We got to work together.
And we can look to Jo Butler in her continuing life in our hearts to guide us, because she understood it wasn't just fighting for policy, it was fighting for people. And that fight wasn't just against what was wrong, it was to make possible what was good. You know, and it sounds like a bunch of verbiage, but we thought of it the day out. When she passed, Eleanor Holmes Norton stood up at that funeral and said only Joe understood the connection between parks and statehood. Because parks is seen as some kind of namby-pamby, doesn't matter, irrelevant kind of thing. She understood, as Malcolm X did, that all revolutions have their roots in the land. You don't have any kind of statehood or democracy or self-determination or equity or hope for justice if you don't get to say, like we were trying to do this weekend and just presenting the go-go and hip-hop and everything across the street, that this is up to the community. We had to deal with our federal babysitters just to be able to have something out in the park. That's not right. And so somehow this granddaughter of enslaved people had seen the promised land, knew she wasn't going to totally get to it, but knew that it wasn't just something in the distant future. There are things that she could do right now that weren't just planting seeds, that were growing, creating the models that could inspire all of us. So when we were digging in the soil with kids who were homeless and never had known living soil, and they were shocked to see snakes in the dirt, because they never knew anything about earthworms. And then when she showed them they weren't going to bite, they wanted to take them home as pets. And she said, now hold on a second. These guys have work to do. They have to make the soil that feeds the roots, that make these trees able to create the leaves that make the air for us to breathe. And it wasn't just some empty talk about inspiration or seed planting. She understood that the miracle of life that we've been handed, of creation, is something that really gives us power if we connect to it, if we connect across all that divides us. And so that promised land can be the park right now. It can be where we make this happen. And that's what I take from what she was challenging me to do in revolutionary nature. She knew that you guys were going to be coming along, that you guys were going to be carrying it forward. She knew that this can all happen. And so we're going to go out because we're over, and we're going to just invite you to connect to Joe's tree, the loblolly pine out there, which needs a little love right now. And her ashes are here, but really her spirit is here. And I want you each to just think, and at any point, today or in the future, speak up about how the Josephine Butler Park Fair can be an anchor of carrying this forward. What is it that, the things that came up for you today that you heard or thought about? We are making this as her library. We have some amazing commitments from Professor Jackson today. What does that look like? How do we really lift that up more than just the name? But the whole spirit that she's. Thank you all so much. I want to invite you out to the on the call morning garden.
Before we leave,
oh, sorry.
I don't know who's behind this. You, Steve, you turn.
Thanks for watching this video from NEXTfest Culture and Conversation series, presented by CapitalBop. There is no way to fully replicate the spirit of those days at NEXTfest, but we are so glad to have this curated archive to share with you. At CapitalBop, our mission is to promote, present, and preserve the sound and soul of DC. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, or find us at capitalbop.com. Be sure to subscribe to CapitalBop's YouTube channel for more content like this. And again, that's CapitalBop with an A, CapitalBop.com. Maybe I'll catch you at the next show.